So today we're going to talk about the pain of despair as defined by Kierkegaard of not being your authentic self. The suggestion is that I would be making, following on from what Kierkegaard suggested, that Nietzsche suggested, and then Jung developed, is that many of our pains, many of our sense of dislocations, our sense of alienation is actually because of this, because we are not living as we should authentically be living. And it creates what Kierkegaard called despair. I would say maybe we could just call it, despair is good, there's a good term for it, maybe just suffering. Any kind of suffering is because you're not living as you should be living. And we also need to explore the concept of individuation. So the problem is pain, the pain of not being your authentic self. The solution potentially could come from individuation and integration of the shadow. How do you have a self? If the self that you have is not your true self, how do you get a true self? And if you don't have a self, what do you have? I would suggest what you have, instead of a self, is an other. If everything that you have inside of you has been given to you by culture, by religion, by tribal norms, or just intergenerational picked up karmic detritus, that can't be a self. Because if it didn't come from you authentically, it's not you. So it's not yourself, it's somebody else's stuff. It's an other. When I showed you the empty cup, in a certain sense, we become possessed. That cup becomes possessed with the spirit of something else, somebody else, other people's drives, other people's desires, other people's hopes and wishes and dreams, and we take them on and they possess us. This is what it means to be ideologically possessed. But wait, it gets worse. Not only are we possessed by the spirit of other people's hopes, drives, desires, by tribal consciousness, by, I don't know, unresolved historical issues. Really, you know, they're still lingering around. Big cultural issues, old battles, old famines, all of these things, we still unconsciously, collectively carry the burden of those things to this day. Unfortunately, the next phase of that is we aren't really living. We don't live our lives. We haunt our lives. Without having an established self-present, how can you be living your life? If you don't know how you felt about your day today because you're emotionally illiterate and you're not allowing yourself to be your authentic self, how could you even say that you know who you are? How could you even say that you know that this is your life? So people say, I know how I feel. And I say, okay, tell me how you feel. And then they tell me what they think. Thinking is not feeling. It's a very poor substitute for feeling. And this is one symptom of an inauthentic self. You are not showing up authentically as who you are simply because you don't believe it's safe and because you've not been trained to do it. It's totally normal. This is the absolute standard way of most people getting through their lives. But it's misery inducing. What we were suggesting in yesterday's video is that a lot of the pain that people say they feel, the anxiety, the depression that they show up to therapy for, is actually the pain of what Kierkegaard would have just called despair. And it's this despair pain is a result of you not living as your authentic self, as you not being you, as you trying to live somebody else's life and showing up as an avatar in somebody else's story. How could you not fall prey to that? How could all of us not fall prey to that? You're not born into some training regime that's trying to individuate you, to wake you up from the collective unconscious. Far from it. You're discouraged from individuating. Individuation in school is just classed as naughtiness, is classed as being confrontational and disobedient and contrarian. You will get punished for that. You can even get expelled for it inside of a family unit, depending on how strict your family unit is. Individuation is typically not rewarded. The tribe, the mass, will not reward the individual. The tribe and the mass will always seek to extinguish the individual because it threatens social cohesion. What's best for the tribe is not what is best for the individual. And what is best for the individual is not what is best for the tribe. So our task is nothing less than going against what literally everybody else is doing and everything we've ever known to be true up until now. That is a very, very, very lonely road to walk. Intrinsic within that road is social rejection. There can be no social acceptance if you choose to take that path. That's just not possible. The cost is, if you don't do it, you're always going to be living according to other people's coordinates, and you'll always know the pain of that despair. The payoff of doing it is, if you do go through it and you're brave enough to see it through to the end, at least you get to live your own life in an individuated, authentic way, which is a very, very rare thing. That's an extremely rare achievement. My advice for beginning to do that would be, try to get a genuine sense of how you really authentically feel in any situation. The honest access of your emotions is critical, but it's hard. It's an extremely hard discipline. This is something that was pointed out first by Dostoevsky and then by Freud. It's a discipline. Always tell yourself the truth about how you feel about any given situation. Don't fall prey to the temptation of self-deceit. Once you've learned to always be telling yourself the truth, then you can have a sense of where your self is, but it is emotional. It's not important what you think. Thinking is the big temptation. With words, the devil can always creep in, and the devil is ideology, really, in this scenario. The great enemy, the great Satan here, would be other people's thoughts, other people's ideologies creeping in. You can't let that happen. The only way to avoid it is through authentically accessing your own emotions. It's an emotional exercise, not an intellectual one, at least to begin with. So there's 3 things that we can do when we're striving to find an authentic self. 3 recommendations I've got for you. So I've given you a big problem. I need to give you some solutions. The number 1 thing that I suggested was to be rigorously honest with yourself, but do it along emotional lines. So don't be checking in with yourself on how you think as much as checking in with yourself on how you feel, how you authentically feel about any situation. Because when you start thinking, that's when the confusion can set in. You want to go into your emotions. It's much tougher. It's a much harder discipline. It's not encouraged. It's not rewarded, and it's not normal. Most people are not going into their emotions to decide what they, to look at how they really authentically feel about a situation. But your emotions are going to give you a stronger sense of your actual self than your thoughts. That's guaranteed. The second thing that you want to be considering doing is, when you have a thought or a preference or an idea, just question it. Just say, where's that coming from? And specifically, you want to ask the question, is that me? Do I actually really think that? Or is this a manifestation of the other? So it's kind of critical thinking, because you are critiquing your own thoughts, but in a specific way, about possession and source and intention. Where's this coming from? Do I think this? Or is this being something that's been trained into me? And the third and final thing, which is the simplest, but would be the hardest if you're very digitally addicted, is solitude. Take time out to be on your own. Specifically, Kierkegaard, and so did Nietzsche, recommended being out in nature on your own and just have silence, have time alone to contemplate and let your thoughts settle. So this is not a cure-all. You've got 3 strategies there, 3 ways of getting things done that will help, but they're not everything. There's an awful lot to undo. The final thought on the solution element that I wanted to leave you with is, don't see this as something you're adding to. You're not adding anything to the cup. You're not finding a new ideology to get fixated upon or some new cult to join. This is an anti-ideology. We're cutting away. We're chipping away. It's sculpting. We're not adding to anything. We're not seeking. It's not even self-improvement. It's not self-improvement. It's a way of cleaning the gunk, the calcium of ideology out of your filters, so that you have the permission to be you. I get asked very frequently, how should I be a better man? How can I be more masculine? How can I, all that. And I'm like, if you're trying to be a man and be more masculine, aren't you essentially faking it? Isn't it performative? Aren't you playing a role? You already are a man, are you not? So just chip away all the gunk and ideology so that you can be the man that you authentically are. So I'm suggesting two things. The source of much of our despair is our failure to live in accordance with our authentic selves, which implies that we have an authentic self, that perhaps even we could go so far as to say we were born with a purpose, and if we bring forth what our purpose is, we'll feel better. As it was said in the Gospel of Thomas, that which is brought forth from within you, what is brought forth from within you will save you. That which is left within you, what is within you can destroy you. If you have some latent energy inside of you, bring it forth, express it, be the person you were born to be. Be authentic, tell the truth. Otherwise, you suffer terrible pain. Individuation, shadow integration, these are not easy, health and safety approved, step-by-step paths to walk down. You will not get support. In fact, it's highly likely you'll be attacked for even making the attempt to do this, because it is an affront to the lifestyle and the choices of the mass man, of the person who doesn't want to integrate their shadow, who's not interested in individuating, who just wants to go along, who just wants to be a member of the greater herd and imbibe more of that slave morality because it makes them feel comfortable. But I do think that this is the only route, or the best route, to any kind of salvation that we could possibly know in this life that there is. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for your attention, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Cheers.